Great. Hi, everybody. We're kind of week 13, 14 of lockdown. We can't quite remember. But what we do know is that over the last few weeks, we've been chatting in this kind of way, just to try and tease out what we think God is saying. What is God saying to us as a church, to Burlington, and what is God saying to us as individuals, as we kind of lean into what that might be and learn from one another. So we've got the wonderful Claire with us this afternoon. And so those questions really for Claire today. Claire, as you think about this whole season, the global church, but perhaps more specifically Burlington here in Ipswich, what's God been saying? What do you think the journey and the voice of God has been about?
Well, it's been really interesting, hasn't it? I mean, it's sometimes hard to work out what God's doing personally and what God's doing on a bigger scale with us. But I'm hoping they'll kind of make some sense as I unpack it. But very early on, there was a little cartoon that went out that basically had a picture of the church building, and it said the church isn't closed, it's here, 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 and here, and it pointed to lots of little kind of houses all around the neighborhood. And I remember looking at that in the first week and just going, that is so what's happened. The Church of God is more active perhaps and more doors open than it was when we had the buildings open. And that image just really struck me, and kind of as I thought about what I was going to share today, it really reminded me that the doors of the church aren't closed. The doors of the church are massively open now. And so I was thinking about our neighbourhood, and like you, Simon, we've been I think more involved in our street than we ever have in the 14 years we've lived here. The doors of the church into our street have been opened because we've opened the door of our lives with my neighbours and with the person down the end of the road that I didn't even know their name apart from to wave at them as I rushed out the street. So I kind of feel like God's reminding all of us at Burlington, and I think he's placed us and prepared us really significantly in the last few years for this moment, that the doors of the church are really open because actually we've opened our lives to people. And it's not just the people in our street. So I think about the school parents that are connecting with through this time. We're traveling similar journeys of homeschooling, and what on earth is that maths project about? And please don't make me do paper mache. I mean, that was an interesting WhatsApp chat. But actually, again, I feel like the doors of my life has been opened up to them in a way that it hadn't been. And that Jesus has been allowed to kind of come out of me and welcome people in to meet him in a different and new way. So I guess number one, I think the doors of the church aren't closed. And in fact, in this season, we've seen God so blow what we think church is out the window. And I guess we see that a little bit on a Sunday morning as well. When we first had that week and we thought, what are we going to do on a Sunday? And we panicked around and learned new technology and filmed ourselves for the first time. We've opened a door online to so many people to meet Jesus. And I'm often the one typing for Burlington, and I'm seeing who's commenting back, and I'm thinking, oh, you're a prodigal. I remember you from 10 years ago. Or actually, it's really interesting to see you watching this because I know you're a neighbour of such and such. The doors of the church have opened again online, and it's so fascinating to see what God is doing. And I guess also with our missional community, me and Rich run the hub. And we're seeing all of us not only opening the doors to each other in a different way, perhaps, but also with our neighbourhoods and our friends. We ran Lego Church as a little trial on Saturday, see whether it would work online. And it did, and actually, I think God's speaking to us a little bit more about how we open the hub up a little bit more digitally, or, as we move into a space where we can see more people, how we begin to do that. So I guess the doors of the church are open in a new way and in a way that God's using. And that's one of my main encouragements and thoughts for Burlington. As we move into kind of lockdown easing and different worlds, how do we carry on with that model? It's an interesting thought. I haven't got many answers yet. That's the next bit I'm hoping God will push me.
Yeah, so can I ask you about that?
Yeah.
We haven't really prepared this conversation in that sense, but what you're talking about is really interesting, because as lockdown happened, you've talked about three things opening up: relationships in your neighborhood, the church itself opening up online, and perhaps the hub as a community opening up, how can we make sure that when lockdown opens, those things don't close again?
Absolutely.
It's going in the opposite direction. What can we begin to put in place now, do you think, to help us that as lockdown eases, we don't just go back to the norm, which seems to be some of these things that are open now would close again? Any thoughts about that?
I've got loads of thoughts, and I'm asking God those questions a lot at the moment. And I think I'm asking God to be really clear with me about what I carry on doing, what I stop, and what I pick back up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's questions for us personally as a family, but also for us as a wider community and as Burlington. You know, what do we stop and say that was for a previous season? What do we carry on doing that we've learnt in this season that are really important? So for us, our neighbourhood would be massively one of those things, and I'm looking to see that how we can support one another in the next season, which I think will be hard for quite a few people. There'll be people who are made redundant in our streets, I think, and there'll be people who perhaps won't have the cash flow they used to. A number of us are still struggling with homeschooling, and you know, how do we move from where we are now to whenever the schools open again? So I think the neighbourhood thing for me is something that I go, do you know what, God's done so much in this season, I'm not prepared to just say that was that season. This is something we take on further. But also there'll be some other things that we will start that are new into the next season, that we take with us. So yeah, there are things to stop and say, well, that was for the previous. There are things that we carry on that we've learnt in this season, and then there are perhaps some things that are new for the new season, and questions that we've got to ask God's wisdom on. The temptation is to just go back to whatever it was before. I think lockdown will ease so slowly for us as a big gathered community that it will force us to look at different models and different ways of using our homes and our gardens and the park and other spaces. So yeah, what is God asking us to pick back up? What is he asking us to stop? And what is he asking us to continue growing in? So
yeah,
maybe
really helpful things for us to wrestle with and be thinking about. Great questions. So what then about you personally through this lockdown time? You've hinted at some of those things already, and what you've been saying. What have you been learning personally, and what's that been meaning for you?
Okay, going to get a bit personal here, but those first few weeks were absolutely hideous for me. Hideous, right? So I am a extrovert.
No.
Really, just in case.
No, go on.
And
Tell us a bit more.
I was put in a house with one extrovert, my 7-year-old, who overnight everything disappeared that he loved in his life, like school, football, dancing lessons, everything he loved, just overnight stopped. So me and the other extrovert, and then the other 2 introverts in our house were just loving it. Absolutely loving it. They've been training for their whole life for this moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
And,
they're waiting for lockdown all their lives.
First 3 weeks saw us as a family just going, what do we do now? You know, and I think in those moments, and I can only see that now looking back, God taught me more about the character that I have and the character of actually my family than he has in the previous 10 years. And some of that was really affirming and great. Quite a lot of it was a little bit painful and a little bit hard. And all those character flaws that you cover up by being busy, or those character flaws that you don't face because actually you can do something to escape facing it, began to come out. And those first 3-4 weeks were quite frustrating. And I think I probably said sorry to God and to my family more time in those 4 weeks than I did previously in forever. I hope, and I do believe this, God did a deep work in me in those first 4 or 5 weeks that I'm seeing fruit of now.
Oh,
and
great.
Well, I hope so. You can ask Rich when you see him, see if he agrees.
I will, don't worry. Perhaps we ought to get him on.
Oh no, he's very busy.
Yeah,
right?
please tell us what God said to you in the first few weeks of lockdown.
And I think for me, I learned so much about God's character in that actually he's patient with me, and that he forgives me, and that actually he's always got my best to bring out of me. And sometimes that means facing the hard stuff. Sometimes that means him literally just going, Claire, come on, you can do this. I'm with you. I'm for you. I love you. And like a number of us, I was walking around our garden first thing in the morning in a figure of 8, and I don't know how many times God's whisper just kind of set me up for what I would face in that day. And again and again, I felt like I was a little bit in that refining fire, because so many things were stripped away. And I had to just go, okay, God, you're pretty much all that's left. What can I do through this? And I believe that he did a deep work in me. And as I've kind of listened to other people as well over the last few weeks, I think that's quite a common story for a lot of people, actually, because we rely on a lot of things external to ourselves to keep us focused, to keep us going, to keep us worshipping. So, you strip some of those things away. I really miss our corporate worship on a Sunday. And that was one of the things that helped me kind of relate to God. And once that's gone, and loads of other things that I had in my life, what was left? And some of that was hard to face, actually. That old Matt Revens song, when music fades and all is stripped away and I'm just before God, that was really my experience. And I think that's common for quite a few people. And I guess the second thing that God's been doing is amongst us as a family. So I know this in my head, and I knew this in my head beforehand, but me and Rich, the primary disciplers of our kids. 11 and 7, I kind of thought I knew that. But actually, once lots of things were stripped away around our time as a community and Sunday school and church, and all of those things were taken away, you go, oh, who's left to disciple these kids? And I went, oh, it's me and you, Rich. Come on, let's get going. And don't get me wrong. I mean, Heather's been doing a fabulous job online, and I know Sarah's been doing great with the youth. But it made me and Rich as parents go, okay, what are we going to do? What are the rhythms for this season that we do together as family that help our kids know that God's with them in this season and God's for them, and that actually God's going to be working in them just like he's working in mummy and daddy. So it's been fun. We've had lots more time just dancing around the kitchen like mad people, worshipping together. We've done a lot more reading of the Bible together. One of us runs assembly every morning, which is basically family devotions, and we've had lots of fun with that. So actually, it's been really helpful for us. Right. Sam always leads communion for us, which is really beautiful. And they've just grown in their faith, which is really encouraging. And I guess that's one of the things I take for me into the next season of let's not stop realizing that actually there are number ones to disciple. Mm-hmm. And actually we've got to keep going with that into the next season and making that a priority in our house in a new way. So yeah, there's lots of things being learned. Lots of them are quite painful, but hopefully they're good.
Super. Yeah, no, absolutely. Super insights. And even if we can't relate to your particular context, that sense of challenge of listening to what God is saying, trying to internalize it, respond to it internally and externally, do something about it, is really encouraging to see and to hear. And no doubt many people will relate to some of both the struggles and the breakthroughs along the way, that we're not where we were 13, 14 weeks ago. We're in different seasons. It feels more spacious, hopefully for many people, than it did back then. But that doesn't in any way kind of minimize the struggle that it's been for a lot of people in different ways. And I guess, Claire, as we hear some of the challenges and struggles for you, others of us will relate to different struggles, but that principle the same if you're in God's speak and working through it. It's super helpful. Hey, thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Super appreciate that as we dig in. As ever, please use the comments to respond with what you think God's been saying to you or to us as a church. We'd love to continue the conversation, and look out Thursday by Thursday for more moments like this where we just dig in with someone around the ministry team about what God's been saying and what God's been doing with them personally. So that's it for now.
Have a great week, everyone.